Arrakis doesn't forgive, it audits. When this chapter opens, the desert has already begun its accounting. House Atreides is gone in the eyes of the Imperium, replaced by absence and a rumor. But absence is a kind of camouflage, and rumor is a vehicle. Paul Atreides and Lady Jessica move as shadows within a nation that survives by measuring every breath, the Fremen. This is where the story stops being a noble house displaced and becomes a people deciding whether a stranger is a prophecy or a problem. The rules are the same and stricter. Water is law. Rhythm invites gods with teeth. Loyalty is not a slogan, it is rationed like moisture. Stilgar War Chief, judge of character by economy of words, adopts Jessica and Paul with a caution that looks like faith because he's lived long enough to know faith is a tool. Chani, no longer a figure from visions but a person who has always been awake, evaluates Paul without deference. She is not here for legends. She is here for survival, for sovereignty, for a future that belongs to her people on their terms. Paul learns the Fremen way like a language. Ride with the Fedekin and keep your mouth closed on sand. Walk off beat to mislead the makers. Treat a stillsuit with the same respect you reserve for a mentor. He is not a messiah in these early hours. He is a student with excellent teachers. Raids follow, surgical strikes against spice production designed to make the Harkonnen bleed money and patience. A train falls. A crawler goes blind. The desert records each attack the way the Imperium records taxes. Rabban, the beast, is handed the bill and breaks workers to pay it. Fade Rotha Harkonnen arrives as the counterpoint, a blade honed in spectacle. The gladiatorial pit on GD Prime, lit like a void where color surrendered, is his church. He is not just cruelty, he is competence raised without conscience, a smile sharpened into doctrine. When the Baron tires of Rabban's waste, Fade is appointed steward of Arrakis with a mandate simple enough to translate. Extract, terrorize, excel. The desert accepts the challenge. The Fremen prepare for a season of precision. Inside Sietch Tabor, politics deepen. Jessica sees a lever the desert respects: belief. The Bene Gesserit's Missionaria Protectiva seeded myths for moments like this. She hates the tool and uses it anyway. The water of life, a toxin that becomes knowledge in the body of a reverend mother, is her hinge. The ceremony is not magic, it is chemistry and courage. Jessica drinks death and survives, memory opening like a vault, generations of women speaking at once, a chorus that will not stop. In that transfer, another life stirs, an unborn daughter hearing language before lungs. The Fremen call it miracle because miracle is a useful word for the rare union of survival and wonder. Jessica's transformation recalibrates the Sietch. Stilgar's faith acquires architecture. Council elders weigh tradition against the opportunity a living prophecy represents. Chani watches all of it with a soldier's suspicion. She admires competence and distrusts theater. Paul stands between them, pulled by love into the concrete and by vision into the abstract. He takes a name that fits the sand better than his house ever did, Muad'Dib, and rides the maker because leadership here is a verb. Worm riding isn't spectacle in Fremen culture. It is logistics at scale, the ability to move armies across miles and histories in minutes. News filters through dunes and courtyards. The Emperor, Shaddam IV, follows reports with a courtier's calm and a strategist's worry. His daughter, Princess Urulan, journal in hand, becomes our lens for imperial weather. Alliances shifting in whispers, the sisterhood advising restraint while engineering inheritance. The Imperium believes it holds the center. Arrakis quietly rips up the map. Paul's visions intensify, options multiply into curses. In one path, he leads a holy war across the stars, banners with his name harvesting planets as if they were fields. In another, he dies before anyone can own him. The spice makes the future feel like an argument he keeps losing. He delays the choice by working the present. Unify Sietches, scale raids, coordinate with Stilgar's quiet networks and with Gurney Halleck, newly found and furious, carrying songs that sound like grief sharpened into strategy. Gurney brings an ugly inheritance, a secret stash of atomics. The Atreides never bent the knee entirely. They hid a key in the ruins of their house. Whether to use it becomes an ethical question disguised as a tactical one. Fade presses, Rabban brutalizes. The Harkonnen production quotas return to cruel efficiency, and the desert answers with asymmetric bookkeeping, more raids, better timing, fewer losses. The Fremen aren't mystical in these sequences. They are engineers of scarcity, soldiers of necessity. Paul proves invaluable not because prophecy says so, but because he respects their math. He leverages the one resource Arrakis has in absurd abundance, sand, and the one resource the Imperium undervalues, Fremen agency. The Bene Gesserit widen the lens. Mother Mohiam sees a pattern that threatens their centuries-long breeding program. Paul is not just a talented branch. He is a wild tree, filling the space they designed with an unasked for shape. They nudge the Emperor toward a solution with the softness of velvet over steel. Bring your throne to Arrakis, end the rumor in person, restore balance with ceremony and force. Shaddam agrees because emperors confuse presence with control. Love, meanwhile, insists on being counted. Paul and Chani build a language of glances and arguments. They want different futures that share a border. She wants freedom without superstition. He wants justice without apocalypse. They agree where it matters on the worth of the Fremen and disagree where prophecy touches politics. Their tenderness is practical. Shared water, shared nights, a promise that sounds like permission to keep arguing tomorrow. Jessica understands and does not interfere. She aims higher and colder, placing pieces for a salvation that looks to Chani like surrender to myth. The desert's largest set piece reads like a hymn to timing. A spice nexus burns under a night without mercy. Carryalls and crawlers become stage props. Fedaykin emerge from sand with knives that end sentences. Paul moves as both commander and instrument, learning that victory here isn't the number of enemies you remove. It's the number of Fremen you bring home. The Harkonnen respond with Sardaukar, holy killers whose brutality is a brand. The Fremen counter with truth. Terrain beats training when your doctrine was written by survival and theirs by ceremony. When the Emperor's standard finally darkens the sky, it does so with the confidence of a man who has never been outmaneuvered by thirst. He brings a cohort of great houses, a camera-ready retinue, and the certainty that titles still matter on Arrakis. Jessica receives him with the calm of a woman who has walked through death and found it disappointing. Urlan records while measuring costs. The sisterhood takes seats like midwives at a birth they engineered and now fear. Paul chooses. The water of life is not for men, the sisterhood says. Paul drinks anyway because he has learned that rules were written to protect power, not the people under it. He dies in a way that terrifies only those who haven't met the desert. For a moment, a breath, for a moment, not. When he returns, the map inside his skull redraws itself with pitiless clarity. Routes through time, corridors through politics, the narrow bridge between liberation and conquest. The Kwisatz Haderach is not a title. It is an address, the shortest path where others need longer roads. Paul hates what he sees and uses it because too many graves have already been dug with Atreides' names on them. From here the story becomes arithmetic the Imperium wasn't prepared to do in public. A shield wall is a doctrine until it is. Atomics are a line the great houses swore to never cross until someone explains that lines drawn by oppressors are not sacred. Worms become cavalry. Sciaches become supply lines. A people long dismissed as background become the axis the galaxy turns on. Stilgar's faith flowers into strategy. Gurney's grief finds a target worthy of it. Jessica's cold calculus warms only when she looks at her son and sees not destiny fulfilled, but a boy keeping pace with a monster called history. The throne room on Arrakis becomes a courtroom. Accusations cut deeper than blades, and the Emperor learns how thin titles are when a planet refuses to recognize them. Urlan sees the world tilt and understands that history is about to borrow her handwriting. The sisterhood revises its plan between heartbeats. Harkonnens learn that fear is cheap until a culture decides it is done buying. We stop at the edge of outcomes, the way a good desert guide stops at the edge of a dune before committing to a slope. What remains are decisions and their prices. What Paul demands, what the Emperor concedes, what Urlan writes, what Chani will and will not accept, what the Fremen will do with a future they bled to own. The film earns its answers with consequence, not magic tricks. It understands that a messiah is only useful to empire if he obeys. It understands that revolution begins to rot the minute it forgets the faces it was supposed to feed. Dune, Part 2 is not about a boy becoming a legend. It's about a people deciding whether legend is a tool or a cage. It treats prophecy as infrastructure and politics as weather patterns that can be surfed but not ignored. It gives love room to argue with power and lets faith be both a weapon and a wound. If you want the literal ledger, who kneels, who signs, who bleeds, that lives inside the feature. What this recap can promise is an Iraqis that keeps its receipts, a Paul who learns to read them, and a future that refuses to be tidy because deserts are honest and honesty rarely is.